Okay, let's just dive right in. Think about the sheer amount of pressure resting on students' shoulders today. Honestly, from the very second you step into high school, it's like a stopwatch clicks. Boom. Clock's ticking. There's this massive, overwhelming expectation to immediately start building out a resume, to join all the right clubs, get those perfect grades, and somehow miraculously figure out exactly what you're going to do with the rest of your life. It's completely exhausting. But what if we've been looking at this entire process completely backwards? What if, before we even start stressing about how to perfectly package ourselves for some college admissions board or a future employer, we actually need to take a massive step back? Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today with this explainer of Foundations of Identity, a student guide to branding. This represents a fundamental shift in how we approach personal development at a really young age. We're not talking about, what to wear to a job interview or how to craft the ultimate elevator pitch. No, we're taking a concept that's usually locked away in high-level corporate boardrooms, and we're bringing it straight into the classroom. We're talking about building from the absolute ground up, starting at zero. We're focusing on the foundational layer of who a student actually is, way before they ever try to pitch themselves to the world.
So really ask yourself, what comes to your mind when you hear the word branding? Usually our brains just instantly jump to the big stuff, right? We picture a room packed with executives brainstorming a multi-million-dollar ad campaign. We imagine those massive, flashy billboards in Times Square, or maybe incredibly catchy jingles that get stuck in your head for literally days, or, that iconic little swoosh logo on the side of a sneaker. It feels intensely commercial. It feels massive. And honestly, it feels entirely disconnected from the daily life of a teenager just trying to survive high school. But we really need to hit pause on that reflex. We've got to take that massive, highly commercialized concept of branding and just radically scale it down. Shrinking it all the way down to the most personal, individual level you can imagine. Because when you strip away the huge budgets and the glossy billboards, what is branding at its core? It's just communication. It's telling a story about who you are. And for a student, that story absolutely does not start with a logo. It starts with something infinitely more complex. Which brings us to Section 1, Rethinking the Word Brand.
To really wrap our heads around this shift, we have to pull apart the stark contrast between the corporate world and the student world. Look, in the corporate sphere, a brand is almost always a highly engineered perception. Think about how a gigantic company launches a new soda or the latest smartphone. Every single detail is calculated. They're using focus groups to test whether a blue or red package makes people feel more energized. They literally hire psychologists to figure out exactly what background music in a commercial is going to trigger the most nostalgia for a specific demographic. It's a meticulously crafted image, entirely designed around one external goal: selling a product to a consumer. It's an outward-facing projection. If the consumer wants edgy, boom, the company acts edgy. But when we transition our thinking over to student branding, that whole paradigm flips completely upside down. The product here isn't something you can just toss into a digital shopping cart. The focus shifts entirely inward. For a student, branding absolutely stops being about projecting this fabricated, market-tested image just to get a specific reaction. It's no longer about looking at a college admissions board and desperately asking, "What do you want me to be?" Instead, it becomes a deeply personal process of discovering a genuine truth. It's all about introspection, not projection. It is the incredibly tough but ultimately super rewarding work of figuring out what actually drives you, what you genuinely value, and exactly who you are when absolutely nobody else is watching.
Moving right along to Section 2, Foundations of Your Identity.
Okay, so before you can even begin to entertain the idea of having a brand, you absolutely must build a foundation. I really want you to chew on that concept for a second. If you're building a house, you definitely don't start the project by picking out the paint colors for the living room or obsessing over what kind of shingles will look cutest on the roof, right? If you try to build a stunning multi-story home on a swamp or on shifting sand, well, it doesn't matter how gorgeous the windows are, the whole thing is going to collapse the second a storm rolls in. And the exact same principle applies to personal development. You simply cannot build a genuine, lasting personal brand without first understanding the solid bedrock of who you are. This isn't just about marketing yourself. It is explicitly focused on the foundations of identity. That structural, fundamental layer is quite literally everything. Too often we see students trying to build their brand on totally shaky ground. They'll pretend to be wildly passionate about some debate club they actually despise just because it quote-unquote looks good on paper. They morph their personalities to fit whatever mold they think society or their friends expect from them. But man, that is an incredibly fragile way to live. When the pressure inevitably mounts, and it will, whether that's during finals week or a major life transition, that superficial, fake brand will just shatter. You've got to pour the concrete first.
So what exactly is that concrete? Identity isn't some shiny product you're trying to sell to someone else. It is the absolute bedrock of self-expression. It's your core truth.
I want you to imagine just peeling back all the heavy layers of external influence that a student faces every single day. Strip away that immense crushing pressure to curate a perfectly aesthetic life on social media, where every post is flawlessly filtered and every single moment is staged. Strip away the expectations of your friends and peers, that constant urge to wear the right clothes or listen to the right music just so you fit in. Strip away the looming, almost suffocating anxiety of college applications or career choices, where you feel like you have to perform like a flawless academic machine. What is actually left when all of that noise is completely gone? That quiet, unvarnished reality, that is your core truth. This is the starting point. Before a student can ever even hope to effectively communicate who they are to the rest of the world, which, remember, is really all branding is, they must first be entirely honest with themselves. You have to articulate your own values, your actual strengths, and your genuine passions to yourself first. Because, let's be real, you can't tell your story to the world if you haven't even bothered to read it yourself.
And that brings us perfectly into Section 3, a guide for students. When we really break down this framework, it's so clear that this material is tailored specifically for self-discovery at such a crucial stage of life. It's intentionally designed as a student guide and a true introduction, meaning it purposefully ditches all that heavy, confusing corporate jargon. You won't find any talk of key performance indicators, market share, or synergistic strategies here. And that is incredibly important, because when you're just starting to figure out who you even are, the absolute last thing you need is a textbook full of corporate buzzwords making you feel entirely out of your depth. But the real kicker here is that this is built specifically for school students. It fully recognizes that middle school or high school is just the very beginning of the journey. It meets students exactly where they are, right in the messy, confusing, and honestly wonderful middle of growing up. It gives them the actual tools to navigate their own identity at a time when they're actively, and sometimes pretty painfully, figuring out their core truths. It definitely doesn't expect you to have it all figured out on day one. It simply hands you a map and a flashlight for the journey of finding out.
Ultimately, this whole explainer shifts the power entirely back into your hands. It is not about what a slick marketing campaign, some random social media algorithm, or even what society at large tells you to be. It's about what your own foundation reveals that you already are. So how will you start building the foundation of your identity today? I really truly want you to sit with that question for a minute. If you avoid doing this foundational, gritty work, you risk spending years building a version of yourself that belongs entirely to someone else's expectations. It's like building that house on sand we talked about. It eventually falls apart when life inevitably gets difficult. But if you take the time right now to dig deep, to find your core truth and pour that solid concrete, you build an unshakable identity. You build a brand that is authentically, undeniably 100% you. The real work starts right now with that single question. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and I strongly challenge you to carry that question with you as you navigate absolutely everything that comes next.